Are you guys ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So my name is Bill Ball. I'm a founding member of the Sales Enablement Society. And I'm excited about the topic today because like you guys, like a lot of you guys, I'm trying to grow my practice, and that means my team. So there's a lot that goes into that. And there's not exactly a script. And because our profession is young and business situations can be unique, you know, if you wanted to figure this out, you know, and wanted to get any kind of perspective, you could use one of the best parts about the Sales Enablement Society, which is to reach out to somebody that you met in a chapter or at our conference that we were just talking about, or another event, or the message boards, and make that human connection. I advise you to do that regardless, but today we're going to do you one better, and we're going to bring that conversation to you. So with me today is Adriana Romero. She heads up Enablement Solutions at LevelJump, and Whitney Sieck, who is the Senior Director of Enablement at Outreach. Did I get that right?
Nailed it.
Awesome.
Got it.
They're both well-versed at being parachuted into a new situation and driving actions forward to grow that practice. But before we dive in, here's how today's going to go. We're going to keep it discussion-based, so no slides. I know that's weird. Hopefully you guys can hang with that. Hopefully that'll inspire you guys to ask more questions. Each of our guests, Whitney and Adriana, they're going to go, I'm going to ask them some questions, and they're going to share their experiences to sort of create some knowledge share around this. Penny's into no slides. So for your job in the audience, as we're having our discussion, please add your questions to the chat. We're going to try to keep track of them and get them in the moment if we can. If anyone arrives late and says, hey, is this being recorded? It's also your job, audience, to say, yes, this is being recorded and it'll be available later. And then finally, we're going to do some pulse checks with you guys in the audience to just see, you know, how things are being discussed and how that affects you and how that lands. So, Joanna, hopefully you are ready to ask our first question. We're not going to do polls today, guys. We're just going to drop these right in the chat so you can answer away. Here is the first question. So, where are you in your enablement journey? So are you A, an army of one? B, you're at an organization where sales enablement is new. C, you're at an organization where sales enablement is a little bit more entrenched. Or D, you're at an organization where there's a giant sales enablement team. And you might be both. Or all four, or two of them. Hopefully you're not all four, actually. That would make a whole lot of sense, but maybe like a couple of them.
I feel like I've done quite a few of these roles in my career, so
Yeah.
I didn't see where people are coming in from.
Yeah.
Some are more fun than others.
Where it's like, well, my team of one, but I'm thinking in hiring. My team is going to grow, and you know, there could be like a whole cascade of things there.
Yeah. But help us meet you where you are right now.
Yeah. I feel we need like a game show like tune right now, maybe. Speaking about singing. Yes.
All you guys, maybe Whitney, based on our answers so far, Adriana. So it looks like you threw out a poll, Joanna. Do you want to show the results of that poll, since we're not seeing a whole lot of stuff in the chat?
Yeah, there it is. We got the results right there.
There we go. So, wow, at an organization where SE is new, would you guys have guessed the way the answers shook out, or did they surprise you at all?
I mean, I think, you know, it's either new or you're going to give it a new spin when you get there.
Yeah.
Like if you're new at a company, it can feel new as well. There's a reinvention that sometimes happens.
And you know what, Whitney, that creates the perfect segue to our first question.
Teed you up for that one.
It's just amazing how that works. Okay, so here's the first question, you guys. So each of you have, as I mentioned before, parachuted into new environments and in your enablement career before. So I know we're talking about teams today, but before we create the vision for that, we got to assess if we have a new environment, we got to assess the current situation. So the situation could be a blank slate, or it could be some existing function of some kind, but we have to know what we're working with to know where we want to go. So I'll start with Adriana. What have you done in a situation like this to get started, and size things up, and what have you learned?
Run away? No, I'm kidding. So it's interesting because I'm gonna say this as a fact. So my second enablement role, I was the first enablement hire. I was the only person. I was coming from an environment that was big. It was corporate. I had a bunch of people in my team, a lot of support. And to be honest, you go through the interview process, you say, yeah, I can do this. And I remember starting my first day after you go through the typical, here's your computer, here's your desk, and get going. And I actually sat down and said, oh my God, I'm going to do this on my own. Like, that's when it hit me. That was the moment when I said, what am I going to do now? So I remember I sat down, of course, went, poured a cup of coffee, came back, and I said, I just have to tackle this, the same kind of structured way I would tackle anything else as I did before. So I said, what do I want to do? I want to get to know the people on the floor and what's happening. So I said, not only I want to have the conversation with the frontline managers and with the VP of sales and everybody, I want to sit down with the floor. And I had the advantage that it was a startup. And we had, I think I had at that point, 7 account executives and like 3 BDRs. And I said, I'm going to meet with each one of them. And remember opening up an Excel sheet, and I'm like, I created a few kind of like items I wanted to check, and I went through the floor, and that allowed me to do 2 things: understand the state of how the floor was and what they needed compared to what the leadership team wanted to do, and B, I got to know the people I was going to enable. And that was kind of like how I broke myself into, that role. And of course, a lot of things followed into that we can get into more details, but I do want to say it for the people out there, feeling that panic is super normal. Whitney, have you felt that too?
Oh yeah, always, right? I think the first thing to recognize though is that you aren't alone. So while you feel alone, you aren't alone. I saw someone mention about deputizing in the chat, and yeah, if you're an army of one and you're starting out and you're feeling alone, the first thing to start to do is to start to make the mindset shift at your organization that enablement is a team sport. And so very similar to Adriana, I call it even more formal. I say I'm doing my listening tour, and like I give myself a grace period where I get to go and I get to learn about the current state, the challenges at multiple vantage points. I think that was key, Adriana, and build those relationships, because if you don't build those relationships, you're going to feel alone for a while. And it's good to move out of that quickly. I think the other thing is like establish credibility early on, right? Like it's important to respect what got the company to where they are today, but to help shift those hearts and minds to get to where we're going. So one thing that I've used as like a trick in my pocket is I'll teach them something about enablement. I'm like, you guys are going to be sharing with me all about your expertise throughout this. Let me share a little too, because this will help us speak the same language. So week 1, I want to say like day 3 at Outreach, I brought all of sales management together and taught them about the ADDIE model, which is what we use for our process on the enablement team. And so I related that process to a sales process, meaning like, you're going to often tell me enable on this thing and not give me time to do discovery. Would you let your reps get on a demo without doing discovery? And so it got us speaking the same language, and we were able to slow down and implement some new things that they had never done before. So it was new muscle memory that we were building. I think.
So, go ahead, Whitney.
Like one other thing that I thought was that has been really helpful when I get started is a leadership landscape survey. So to all of the different leaders, get them to respond to a few of those similar questions that help us to understand like, how are they defining enablement? What came out of it at my organization, it might be similar at yours, is they came back with 1, a name. So a person had been associated with enablement.
Yeah.
Or 2, it was like very deliverable focused. They said 4 key things over and over again: onboarding, training, content, and tools. And so I saw the trend, and I was able to shift the perspective to say, it's not about those deliverables anymore. It's about strategically partnering together to drive outcomes. And so we started to shift from, okay, enablement doesn't own onboarding. we all own onboarding.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, right. But we own the strategy to decrease ramp time. And that's been really helpful to get them to see like we're in this together. It's a team sport.
100%. And I think, to what you say when you spoke about the leadership and getting them to say, there's also people who say, I don't know what enablement is. I really don't know what you're doing here. Like I've had those conversations, not with maybe the VP of finance or the VP. I've had those conversations with the CEO of the company of, oh, we're glad you're here. And we kind of understand why the CRO wanted to bring you, but what is it that you're going to do again? Like now that we're here after the interview. And it's very interesting because to your point, Whitney, you have the clean slate and you can actually mold these minds to what you want them to be. And you are, when in the future, people are going to say, what's enablement? Enablement is Whitney. Like, I think that type of reference is like, you made it possible for them to learn what enablement is. And I think that's a great position to be in my opinion.
So I was trying, I hope the audience, took in all of that, because I was trying to be like, okay, these are the nuggets, but like I ran out of fingers. So I'm going to try to recount some of these back to you guys, because this all hit home for me when I started in my last role, right? To Whitney's point, you've got to win hearts and minds. The job can't be done from the bleachers. Like if you're just totally operational and you're not making those human connections, how are you expecting to get on them to get on board with you to change? So it's both of those things. I like to say you've got to win the popular vote and the electoral college. The popular vote may get you like something for a while, but if you're not producing results and bringing in real change, it's that. I also love it's not my cheese. Onboarding, that doesn't belong to somebody. Or HR, if you want to have it, you can have it, but we're all working together to get to an outcome. It's not a deliverable. It's not what we're throwing over the fence. It's your job isn't X and your deliverables are Y. It's how is what we're doing as a collective actually impacting the people that are going out and getting the revenue every day, and making their lives easier. And there's a lot of change management in that. There is a whole change management in that.
There's a lot of change management. I also say there's a lot of, I was telling somebody yesterday, I see the enabler in a sales floor like the counselor in the school. It's like the people that come to you and ask you for things. I think that besides the point of we're there to help the revenue team drive the outcomes that they set to do, we're there to help the managers do all these things. It's like we're also doing something that it's very difficult to quantify. That is, we are kind of like sometimes that counselor, that escape, that person that they want to come and talk to. And I always use in any slide where I'm going to talk about something internally in enablement, that Lucy slide where the doctor is in and she has a little 5 cents. I use that to determine like the enabler is in, because sometimes that's what people need, both like on the sales floor and the leadership team, and even people that are not even on the sales floor that just sit down and say, I don't know how to talk with these people. Like, how do I communicate with the sales floor? And they just need that out, right?
Well, and Adriana, that's such a good point. And I know we'll talk about this later in our conversation, but I think why it's such an emotional reaction when you first join a company or when you're first building a function is because that's all they have to go off of are their emotional reactions to things happening on the floor. And so when you drive to a more data-driven conversation over time, that's when you can start to identify like where the real challenges are together. And so that's the shift that I think we all want to see. And it takes some time. And we'll talk about how we get there today, because there's plenty to cover.
So again, you guys are just the transitions here today. They're just on fire. The audience doesn't know this, but I know this and I feel it in my heart. So we've talked about getting the lay of the land. Let's just fast forward a little bit and say, okay, now that you have, because we're talking about teams today, now that you've created that vision, of what you're trying to do, aligned to the specific business needs, because based on your stories, like there's some common themes, but we all know like businesses have different needs. The marketing team may be like running at full speed and like it's more about the translation there, or we're picking up something from where like an L&D department just does deliverables all day and we have to do a transformation there. There's all kinds of needs. But let's say you've got that vision now. You figured out like, okay, this is my business within a business. Here's how we're going to operate. This is how I want to scale. Now that you've created that, here's my question finally. How have you sold that vision, and brought other people along on that journey, and how did you get it funded? I'll start with Whitney this time.
Yeah, this is such a good question to talk through because I feel like I get this question a lot from people I mentor. The first thing that I talk about is I'm not a believer in ratios. You're going to get challenged from your sales leaders, from your CRO to put together a headcount model that makes sense based on ratios. And where I don't see that necessarily being the fit for all organizations until you've leveled out to a steady phase of growth. In the beginning, at a super fast startup, like where I'm at with outreach, it's more important for me to understand what is going on with the business. What are we trying to achieve? So having that seat at the strategic planning table helps me identify what are the dependencies. For almost every large change initiative, there's going to be an enablement dependency. And then that helps me identify what are the appropriate resources that are required in order to make that shift. And so when we talk about enablement being different everywhere, this is where you get that opportunity to be really unique and say, here's what we need to meet us where we are right now. And for this specific example at Outreach still, I walked into a lot of enablement debt. We weren't at the right size of team for the right phase of growth that we were at. And so I've done a ton of hiring this past year. When I think about like a philosophy to buy into around this, it's probably more around like, get your role coverage first. That's my big tip right out the gate is like set up sort of a business partner model for folks that can deeply understand the business units that they're working with. So like get SDR enablement, AE enablement, CS enablement if you're going across the whole revenue org. The next phase after that is make sure that your segment separation is covered. I don't know about y'all, but like at Outreach, there's two very different types of sale based on what organization size we're working with. And so our transactional sellers need something totally different than what our enterprise and strategic sellers need when it comes to an approach. And so having that type of dedication is helpful. Once you move past that phase, sorry, Adriana, it's
no worries.
It's that constant evolution. Is it programs that you go to next? Is it regions, right? Like region specific that you grow to after that. And like down the road, when you're getting to one of those like really big organizations that we asked about in the poll earlier, that's when you can start to think about like verticalization and specialization.
Yeah, 100%. And you bring a great point because especially it really depends on, your high growth startup, like in your case, maybe you're like in Series A, you're in Series B, you're the first hire, you need to think about these things. Yep. You're also think about the fact that when you're the first enablement hire, your example is going to lead the way of how they're going to take whatever you present to the leadership team, in a way of, oh yeah, it makes sense because this person has shown that they can deliver what they deliver. I have been in situations where I had to kind of start mapping out my team, and I started with, I should map them out, by roles and say like an SDR enablement or maybe an AE enablement. And then I realized practically it was not maybe working and we had to do a little bit of a shift, and that's okay because you're still learning as the company grows. And maybe, to your point, I've been in companies where it's so specialized that there's product enablement because they have to work directly with product marketing to do specific enablement to the sales team. And there's a whole set of people that are not there. And there's people that have like the central enablement. That's kind of like that single source of truth, or some people call it the center of excellence, where it's like all the sales methodologies and the sales tools and all those things happen. It's very important that you kind of sit down and understand where your team is, where the growth is in the next, I would say the next year, especially in the pace that the world is going nowadays, and kind of map it out to the best point. But I'm 100% with you, Whitney. Ratios, oh my God, they would have to hire like, 200 enablers in a company for ratios to work.
Yeah. And I get why it's so appealing. Like we want to fit into that nice, neat box like sales does, where they can have that model to fall back on. But it's harder for us. We are a newer industry. And so we're defining this ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm seeing, this is huge. One thing, thanks again for reminding me, you guys, that I didn't catch in the first pass was to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And to whoever made the point about like, this is something that we would ask our salespeople to do too. It's the same thing, right? It's like, what are people already doing great, that I can build off of? and make champions out of, because then they're going to be, you know, more beholden and more likely to partner with my work. I'm seeing a few themes kind of related, tangentially related to some of the things that we're talking about. I mean, there's all kinds of enablement questions popping off. So I love to see that some of the people in the audience are answering them too. I think that's fantastic. And that's what's great about our community. One thing that I am seeing a lot of is stakeholder management. So when you're getting into that new environment, kind of going back to that first question, when you're getting in that new environment and HR says, well, we own training, or isn't enablement sales training, or marketing is like, oh, we're doing enablement, we're just fine with that. With those existing environments, like, how do you guys handle those situations? Adriana, I'll start with you on this one.
So funny you bring that up, because yesterday I was having that conversation. I met somebody who is looking to hire their first enablement hire. And he actually told me, yes, product marketing told me, but we're doing that. Aren't we going to duplicate efforts? It was pretty interesting. And I told him, look, I respect a lot what product marketing is doing, but that's so focused on the product and that point in case and time, and there's so much work to do there. That's a function on itself. Let's think about what are the other things that enablement is contributing to. You are the partner in crime of the revenue leadership, who are saying we need to hit a specific goal at the end of the year or the quarter. This is where I need to go. How are you going to help me influence that? So we move the proverbial needle. Like, and we make sure that people are learning, are doing, and are basically hitting the outcomes, and to help us kind of translate all the stuff that comes to us and convert it into where are priorities and how can people actually read this. That's like stage number one, right? When we talk about onboarding, yes, HR does onboarding, and we all do it. When Whitney says it's an everybody's effort, it is an everybody's effort. All enablement is doing is creating the workflow of how people should be onboarded. What are the things they should do? What are the milestones they should be hitting in each kind of like the periods that are defined, and working with their managers and their peers can make sure that that person is embedded not only in the product knowledge, but in the culture and everything that happens, because we all know there's not only a company culture, there's a sales floor culture as well, right? So that's super important. And then there's the component, as I call it, the data dictionary of between everything that happens in the company, and how do you put that in digestive pills that the sales team can take in the short time that they have to digest these things. So it's a complete different type of role. There's a lot of program management, organizational skills, learning and development knowledge, sales knowledge that has to happen here, that it cannot be there, but I get it. It's as to Whitney's point, it's a transformation that's going to take time. And in some companies, it will take a lot of time because of status quo that exists there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first slide that I showed on that day 2 presentation where we educated the sales leaders, slide literally said status quo to status woe. And it's like, here's how we get to that next phase of working together. And Bob actually brings up a good point in the chat that sort of layers on to what you're talking about, Adriana, around prioritization. And it's around operating rhythm. I think, we're on this theme of meet people where they're at. Salespeople in particular, like take out revenue enablement, but talk about the sales side of the house specifically, are such creatures of habit. They've got these rhythms that they work in. And so it's really important to understand that, to identify where are the best times to enable. So are you going to be doing it, middle of the month, middle of the quarter? That is the sweet spot, right? You're not competing with their closing cycles. You've got a really good opportunity to sync in with the information and can do a larger initiative around that time period. But like end of month, end of quarter, avoid that week.
Yes.
Yeah. on my enablement calendar, the last month of the year is literally like leave the team alone is what my
team this is the time to do strategy and planning. It's funny because you see it even in the enablers like meetings. It's like second to third week of the month or second or whatever. This is when we can meet, because that's where the floor is kind of like quiet. It's like the week too. It's like you're busy until like very, very into stuff that's with the floor until a certain day. And then you're like, no, now today is when I can do these things. It's a pretty interesting rhythm.
They start giving you, they being the islands of departments, start giving you a lot more space when you start defining your job by impact, because they weren't doing that before. A lot were doing that before, and they start giving you the respect and space when you start demonstrating that. One more thing to what you guys are mentioning, this requires when you're coming into an organization where somebody says, well, this is my perception of this, or I've got, I do enablement already, why do we need it? Right. Clearly, like, you're being interviewed or something like that. So somebody knows, right? But we're not going to play that angle. We're going to get educated on these other departments that contribute, whether it's HR or marketing or whoever. Chances are they're compensating for a lack of you.
Yeah.
So the conversation with them is not like, hey, I'm here to take your stuff. The conversation with them is like, wouldn't you like to do, I see you're spending your time here, and here. Wouldn't you like to work on more demand gen, or more customer referral programs, or the 40 things that are possible in marketing that you haven't been getting to because you've been trying to like make everything actionable by the field.
Yeah.
It's unlocking those conversations. Hey, would you like help with that? Why can't we partner together and let's see what you've been working on?
Well, totally, Bill, but I've almost experienced the opposite extreme where it's like, the other departments want to give me all their work to see through to completion.
Yes.
So,
you're here.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, you're the one who takes this all the way through and enables and engages with the sellers. So there is a catch-22 there to be careful of.
Yeah.
And I think the way to do it is programmatic efforts and frameworks, right? Like taking a marketing example for around events. Ad hoc communications were going to the team around different events that we were doing. And, people were disappointed with the results of how people were engaging. Great. Let's create a repeatable playbook. This event's happening every single year. What do you do when this happens? And let's educate everyone on that process. And then let's live that process so that it becomes part of their rhythm.
Oh, yes.
I want to live in Whitney's world. Where all of this has architecture. I think I'm getting more and more relaxed every time I hear like, hey, there's a process for that. You guys, it's okay.
There has to be a process for everything. If not, you becoming the firefighter of the floor, and that's super important. And that's going to go well with what we're going to talk next. But I remember being in a situation where people were even gearing like technical questions to us. I'm like, we're not IT support. Like, are you kidding me? It's like, there's a definition. So we're defining not only the rules of engagement and how you work with me, this is what I do, and here's my limit. And up to here, I can help you. From here to here, we need to find somebody else. And I cannot drive that SLA for you. So that is super important, because if not, if you don't take the outcomes, make your priorities based on those outcomes, define those frameworks and those SLAs and rules of engagement, you are going to be so overwhelmed doing everything that you're going to even start thinking about your team of people to come and help you firefight. So you're not even going to be an effective leader for the people that you're going to hire in your enablement team, because these people are going to need that structure for them to learn and to help and to be successful as well.
Totally. I think we've done, you guys have done an amazing job of putting down some pillars. Maybe it's time now that we move into a little bit more of the uncharted territory, which is why, like, if I'm a practitioner, that's why I'm showing up today. I want to know, how do you guys do this team thing? Like, how, what's working, what hasn't? Before we do that though, I want to do, Joanna, I want to do another poll with the group. When you think about hiring, it's not that simple. I saw a sales enablement specialist the other day who used to be a dance instructor, and that was their previous role. It brought me back to thinking, what was I doing before sales enablement? We've all come out of some kind of soup. There is not a clear-cut path unless you're at a really big organization with a really robust sales enablement function, and not a lot of us have those yet. So I'm curious to the audience. The question is, what was your role prior to enablement? Put your answers in the chat and let's see what you got.
Let's see. Yes, I love the chat ones.
There's got to be some good ones in here. So I started my career in sales, but before that, I was a professional bingo caller. I think there's some transferable skills there.
I like that, Whitney.
Gosh.
A full tuxedo with tails at a country club, had a stage to myself. It was a good situation.
I like that. Are there pictures from that era? We need to surface some pictures there. There you go. I like that.
Nice.
It's funny because I tell people I studied engineering. Like I studied engineering to go work and doing like supply chain, optimization in some plant somewhere and wearing some, tough boots and a hard hat. And suddenly I find myself in sales, and suddenly I find myself in enablement. It's like, there's, to your point, Bill, there's no straight line. There's like everybody. One of my good friends, and I saw it in one of the answers, kindergarten teacher. One of my good friends was a high school teacher. Now he's one of the top enablers. Like it's amazing. And there's so many transferable skills there.
One of the answers in the chat struck me, and that was before I got into marketing, you guys. I took a pause and raised my 18-year-old son. So I think there's some qual in that, especially about learning, if not organization and structure and a lot of other things too, that matter just as much. A chemistry teacher. Penny was a chemistry teacher. This is wild, you guys. So I want to take this into the next question. We'll come back to Whitney on this one. Yeah. So in your experience, given that it is a soup out there, what did you look for? Who did you hire and why?
I mean, talent's tight, right? So this is a new industry. So we're all sort of like, you either were born into it, and that's a very small group of us, or you've come into it from a very different space. And so being open-minded about who you're hiring for your team and knowing that they're not going to have that been there, done that experience is really important. You also have to get your hiring managers and your teams to understand that as well, and start to call out some of those transferable experiences. So like my team right now, one of the things I'm most proud of is we are incredibly diverse when it comes to our backgrounds. And I think that's what makes like this transformer. We're talking about enablement and transformation. I mean, we're all these different parts. And when we come together, we've got this full puzzle that's just really powerful. So people on my team come from, I've got someone who, has been an award-winning enablement person at a previous organization. But I also have someone who was a consultant between sales and marketing organizations at enterprise companies. And those transferable skills are incredible at driving alignment across multiple executive stakeholders. I've got folks on my team that come from an L&D background that really care about that instructional design and that learner experience. And, it's just truly across the board. Right now I'm considering someone who's an executive assistant to move into a program manager role. Their organizational skills are killer, and the communication skills are awesome. So it's like, you just have to see what's beneath that, what's really the underlying competencies and capabilities in order to drive that forward.
Yeah, it's so, I think, when people ask me about that, I sometimes I say, look, there's some things that you look and you can give me all the scorecards and all the recruitment kind of like tests and everything. But there's a sixth sense that you see the person and you say, if I put this person in front of the sales floor and they meet them for half an hour, I want to see how the sales floor reacts to this person. And if they react properly, I think I got a person who's a winner. So I remember when I was recruiting in my old company, I said, okay, I need to hire 2 people. And I decided to hire an internal person who was a BDR, and she came into enablement, very young, very green, but she was very hard worker. And I hired another person who had absolutely no enablement in her background. She had sales, she had events planning, which is a great transferable skill too. Most organized person in this planet that I know so far. And I was like, okay, this is the person that will help me. And I remember saying, let me put her in front of the team and see if people will feel like they want to learn from her or like follow her. Like there has to be a sense of following. And they were the most different personalities, to your point, Whitney, and your team, different background experiences. And the way that we worked as a team was so good because of that.
Yes.
Because we complemented each other in our skill set, because we learned from each other, because we kind of became like a little kind of family in terms of we're like the enablement front, and we're like here, like, us and everybody. And I think it's super important that there's an open mind for that. And I see a lot of these job descriptions that they say, I need specifically this. And I'm like, why? Don't cancel people that want to apply and will feel like, oh, I don't have that, so I'm not going to apply. Maybe that was your ideal candidate right there. So be open also when you write your requisitions, when you kind of like get introduced to people, when you're like LinkedIn and you're like, okay, could this person be? It's very important to have that open-mindedness to the diversity of your team.
Totally. And the only other thing I'd add is look internal. That institutional
Yes.
knowledge that you have internally is going to save you on ramp time. And if you yourself have enablement experience, there's nothing more fun than doing what we're doing now, enabling the enabler. Like that is something that really brings a ton of joy. So that's something I have a few really strong folks that were internal folks at Outreach that moved into enablement for the first time, totally had the transferable skills, were really respected by their peers. And it makes me really excited that they were attracted to work on this team that I saw it in the chat, like at other companies is viewed as a support role. And here, someone that was a senior manager of SDRs is now in charge of our SDR enablement. That's more strategic. And that way we're able to do more and have that multiplier effect. So look internal too, because that ramp time to understand the current state of the team is big. Tribal
knowledge, mic drop on that. If you can get it, and the person has the right DNA. And I want to ask you guys about that as a follow-up question, because where a lot of the people answered in the first poll where enablement was kind of newer or like they're trying to put it together, I'm imagining like, okay, well, they've got a team of 2 or they're hiring 3 or something like that. At that stage, you may not be, future state thinking about, well, how do I hire somebody to serve this, the SDRs? And what it may be people that like do something really well that you don't do that well.
Yeah.
Or it may be like, okay, I've got my enablement tech running. I need somebody to manage that system and like own some of onboarding and get a point of view on that, as well as a few other things. So it's kind of like different projects that you're ready to hand off that are like running. And then from there, there's another 40% of the job that's not necessarily defined that they're going to establish a point of view on and start bringing their own talent, which is super weird to hire for. So, it reminds me back in my days of like, and you guys probably live this a little bit too. It's like hiring brand new SDRs, right out of school or something like that. There's only so much prior experience that you can look for, but you do look for a lot of DNA. So I was curious, I'll start with Adriana here. What kind of DNA do you look for in your team?
And that's a really good question, because there's somebody in the chat asking about how do you give instructions to recruitment for this? Because there's so many and there's so many things. I would say sit down. If it's yourself or if you have a team, sit down and look at the qualities that you have. You're going to find things that are different. You're going to find things that are similar. I look for things, for example, the person has to have in their DNA this ability or want to help others. And this can come in different forms. You could have been a volunteer. You could have been a coach. You could have been a teacher. You could have been a mentor. There has to be something in your nature that leaving what you're doing when somebody asks you a question and being keen to do that is something that is natural for you. And the same goes to, for me, in the DNA of an enabler is the ego is not there. It's more the pride of when I see my team winning or when I see this person winning, I feel successful and I feel achievement. That is another thing that's very important, because we all know in enablement that, and we say it a lot, when things go wrong, there's something, the enablement did something wrong. That was the training, that was the material. Things go right, they forget where we were. And that's okay, as long as we see those people succeed. So there has to be that sense of being proud of others' accomplishments. I think the fact that you're naturally inclined to be okay with change and uncertainty and moving things that today you have one direction and tomorrow it's another one, you have to be okay with that level of uncertainty and time to know that. And also to have a person that is able to sit down and question why, like, why are we going to do that? I remember in my team, in my previous company, I would come and say, hey, VP of sales said we need to stop this, like turn it away and do it. And she would always say, why? Like, why do we have to do it? And I would be like, sometimes I would say, like, I didn't even ask that question, but I love that I had her in my team to ask the question. So it's super important to kind of see those attributes in the person. And those are things that are going to come through, maybe not in paper, maybe they're going to come through throughout the interview process, but those for me are the ones that are work. Whitney, what do you add to the DNA?
I mean, I'm just smiling over here because I feel like I'm going to say literally the exact same thing, but in different words. So I'm just going to be like cave woman for a little bit and just rattle off a few key words that come to mind that exemplify exactly what I think Adriana was talking about. the way that I most quickly say it is that I'm looking for someone who has a philanthropic mindset with an entrepreneurial spirit. And it's for those reasons that Adriana was talking about. You want them to view it as an internal customer first. And so I think that that's really important. The other side is around change management, project management, consultative skills, and curiosity. I think when you think about it in those buckets, if you get someone who has that, they're going to be strong in any role on your team.
I'm going to add empathy to that mix.
Yes.
You're not here to throw stuff over the fence. You're here to put yourself in somebody else's shoes before you do a darn thing. So love this list. Hopefully, audience, you got a lot of DNA to start looking at, and then it's just formulating the right questions to pull that out of the people you're interviewing. So we're going to keep moving on. And I am going to put most as problem solving. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. And yes, coachable, please. So all of us who have been in sales know how important that is as far as a hire goes. We can't just have an independent operator in a team that has to be so attentive to what's going on around them. Joanna, we're going to do question number 3. And that's for people who have hired somebody for their team. So audience, if you have hired somebody for your team, what was the role of your first hire or your most recent hire?
This is when we need that Jeopardy music.
Yeah, we need. I was actually literally playing it on my head right now.
I saw you dance. I saw you dance.
God. I'm like, I think it's my need for music all the time. I need to fill the white spaces of silence with music. It's
I love it. These are really interesting coming in, right? Like, I'm like very technical. That's something that I wasn't expecting to see.
I like SE consultant.
Yeah. And the junior role, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you get someone in, especially like that team of one, you need someone who's really tactical to actually accomplish some of the programs that you're putting into place so that you can scale them.
Yep.
Nicholas, you have a lot of people. We should send some people to you because there's always people around there. They're looking for that entry role, right? Yeah.
Marion is her most.
I'm very interested in this one. SE origination specialist. Prashant, that's an interesting one. If you can further elaborate in the chat, I would love to understand what you're looking for there. That's the first time I see that one. Yeah. Oh, so, regional coverage. Yeah.
While we wait for Prashant, I'm going to give you guys the next question. Given where this time has flown by. And I think this is a really important one, right? So you've created your vision, you've gotten management, stakeholders, et cetera, to buy in, you've made your hire. What have you done to prepare these folks, onboard them, and equip them for success? A lot of times in a role that is brand new that you just created. How do you do that? I'll start with Whitney.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to do now. I now have a team of 8 this year. So I've hired and onboarded 7 folks already. So wow. Yeah, it's been fun. So the first thing is, we know how to onboard. We do this for our team. So look through that lens when you're thinking about your new hire as well. Sometimes it's easy to just go past that. You yourself didn't get an onboarding that was proper. And so you're like, oh, they can figure it out. I figured it out. Give a little structure and guidance. It's going to go a long way. So I put together a 30-60-90 plan that outline a few of the goals that are, month by month. First, I want them to learn the landscape. I want them to learn the current state of the business, build relationships. And I think what's unique about this is I define some key measures of success for 30-60-90, but they're minimal. And what we do at the end of the 90-day is actually a SWOT analysis where they come back and they define what are going to be their measures of success. So there's a collaborative effort there, but I think when you're starting up an enablement function, you have to be able to understand what's achievable versus picking some pie in the sky metrics that you won't be able to measure or hold them accountable to. The next thing that I did is when I hired a group of people, I needed to drive alignment across my team. So I did something that I think is really fun, which is we called it mission maturity. And it was a top secret spy mission. And they all followed the same 6 steps and had the same template to use, but they went back to their different business units and they did reconnaissance, and they sourced all of the different onboarding plans that exist from all the tribal knowledge, brought them back and consolidated a summary that highlighted those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, what's working well, what's challenging. And that gave us a really clear view of the world and identified where are things that we could, streamline and pull together into something scalable, or where are things where they truly need to be unique. So that set us up to have a maturity model conversation where we've actually outlined our 3-year plan for driving and optimizing our onboarding program and outreach across all of the different go-to-market functions. So it was a really cool experience, brought us all together. We learned about each other's businesses, and we ended up with the same North Star at the end so that we can start to drive towards those center of excellence models and processes that in play there. So I think those are really important. And then at the end, we revisited OKRs for the next quarter. And so they got to actually build those in alignment with some of the strategic goals of the business. So let them lead the way too. That's a big part of being an enablement. You're hiring strategic folks. Don't be over prescriptive and allow them to come to the table with their recommendations based on being so closely embedded in the business.
100%. Sorry, my dog decided he had an opinion about this, and it's most likely this is a time where you have like the couriers coming. So please excuse me as I'm talking. My big Australian Shepherd decides to participate as well. When I love that plan. I think it's so good. When I worked in a big organization, it was awesome to have a lot of that kind of structure and getting. And there's difficulties for both, right? I did my hires like at LevelJump right now. I'm an army of one. And hopefully that will change by, the end of the year. But as I think about, what I want to do, I think about what I did in my past role. It's like I brought these people that were different. They came one outsourced, one insourced. And I'm like, how do I get them to work together and to kind of like mix up with each other? But it's like, how do I get them onboarded? So what I did with the external hire, she joined a class because when I hired her, I was also hiring an onboarding and a sales class. And I said, you're going to follow. We called it, we said, you're going to follow the onboard for 30 days. And I want you to follow it with 2 optics. First optic is learn. Second one is tell me what you would change. Like I want you to come here at the end of this and tell me what would you do different. I don't want you to sugarcoat it. I don't want you to say, you can call my baby ugly. That is fine. And it was great because I learned so many things that we were not seeing in the onboarding program. She got immersed. I actually had this person complete sales calls and prospect calls and demo calls and all those things. And I find that getting the person, depending on the type of enablement they're going to do, immersed in that role, shadowing, doing, and learning, when they come back to enablement, their viewpoint is so different because they view it from the point of view of that role. So I think that's super important. I think it's important to not lose the sight of many times enablement leaders, we have a lot of stuff here. And we don't put it here or in paper because we don't need to, right? We have it here. We're still like, especially if you're an army of one, write those strategies and your ideas down somewhere and share them with your team. It doesn't have to be something elaborate. I am the biggest #1 fan of whiteboarding. And I did that a lot with my team. We would go to a room and I would say, the enablement team, Thursday all morning, we're not here. And I did a lot of that during the onboarding of my people. And I did whiteboarding sessions where I spoke about, this is what I think. And I did a brain dump. What do you guys think? And then we created what was, our like one and aligned strategy for all of us. And as we change and as the priorities of the business changed, as we went into a pandemic, as all these things, we were able to sit down again and pivot because it was a collaborative effort. So I 100% agree with you, Whitney, bringing everybody into it together, making them a part of it and make them, they're enablers that are hired to do all these things too. It's going to be super important for how the team is going to make that beautiful sound as they continue to move throughout, the course of the org.
Totally. There's nothing more rewarding than onboarding an onboarding specialist too, because you have to instill like all that passion for the org, because that's that first impression for everyone in the future. So it's fun. I am jealous of folks who get to continue to do it. So
yeah.
All right. Once again, I'm going to try to summarize what I just heard because holy cow, that was a lot. And the reason I say this is, we have all of this other stuff around us operating like just like clockwork. The sales job descriptions, the sales onboarding for the variety of different roles, it's easy to start looking at ourselves and say, why don't I have everything figured out to the T like that for the team? Or for my team, it's a different standard. It's totally a different standard. So if I'm thinking about what I just heard, yes, there's some like processes and things that need to get documented. If you don't pull those things out of your head, they're going to stay your processes and not become the team religion, right? So that stuff needs to get set up, and you need to take the time. You need to go slow to go fast to do that and put some of that stuff in place. But the thing that excited me most that I heard from both of you is what kind of exploration can this new hire do to gain intelligence on the business and gain perspective? Because they're not going to be able to do that SWOT that Whitney mentioned. They're not going to have that point of view until they've taken a few things over, you've handed off a few things, but also they have like investigated what's going on in the business. So what's a creative, this is your onboarding, you guys. What's a creative way, based on the things that you want them to take on, what's a creative way that they can investigate what's happening in the business and gain intel and gain a point of view on it? Yeah. From there, then it's growing, right? When I was interviewing for my last person on my team, so many applicants were like, so tell me how my performance is going to be measured. That was like one of the first things. And like, you've got to sort of get them, if they're coming out of that sales role, you got to get them off of that tack and say, look, we're measured by the impact we create for the field. And so you're going to be a big part of that. And here, so it's changing that conversation a lot. We have 3 minutes left. Do you guys want to try to tackle the last question lightning round style?
Game on, let's do it.
Yes, let's do it.
I love this team. So last question, how have you ensured new hires, recent or in the past, have shown ongoing measurable results? Let's just leave it at that. I will start with Whitney. So you got like a minute and a half.
Ooh, okay. The first thing is be realistic. Depending on where you are at your organization and their maturity, you may only have vanity metrics and anecdotal feedback. So if that's what you got, work with it and use that to start to build business cases for partnerships with RevOps and BI and build those relationships so that they can prioritize. So what I mean by that is like, I wanted a pretty fancy ramp metrics dashboard when I joined Outreach. There's a lot of things that RevOps is working on, knowing that we are also a sales tool and technology. And so I had to work with the head of the revenue operations team and talk about, what is the board interested in? We're hiring all these people this year. Don't they want to know how impactful that's going to be? And so lead the witness a little bit, but that helped to get it prioritized. And so we're excited about where we're headed. Last thing is, over time, make sure you are driving towards those metrics. So we host a QBR that is internal for internal stakeholders. So each of the enablement managers runs one and they focus on the metrics for their org. It's going to get more and more mature over time. Done.
Yeah. I think it's super important that when you get a new hire, you put them through a ramp phase, just like a salesperson has a ramp quota. There's a ramp phase of what are the things you're going to do in your first 90 days. And to Whitney's point, sometimes very difficult to measure in an outcome because A, maybe you don't have the tool, or B, maybe you don't have the outcome that you can measure them at that point. But then start to embed that into what you're measuring them. I like to use development plan meetings and kind of use that against not only what they want to do, like as they grow, but also what are the OKRs or the goals that we want to hit and say, okay, so we have 5 million ARR for this year and this quarter is this, what initiatives are we going to work out so we can actually, think that we're impacting this and put it into numbers and put it there, have the tools to measure it and make sure that you measure against the outcome and see how you're going with them. And I would say that that's important for not only for yourself as a leader to show how your team is giving impact, but for the person to know how are they impacting the team too, and where do they have to tune in?
So I'm not even going to try to follow that, you guys. I think that was an awesome lightning round way to sum this stuff up. I will be sad if everyone attended did not take away at least a couple of nuggets on thinking about how to hire, who to hire, how to shape the vision, or just what we tagged on for a few seconds there, how to measure what you got. But what I'll ask you guys is, as the last and final question before we wrap up, Whitney, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, another member of the society, what's the best way to reach out to you or ask you a question about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn. I think that's probably the best way to stay in touch. And thank goodness we have it, right?
100%. Oh yeah, that's the way. And also, if you guys, members of the Sales Enablement Society, make sure that we also can connect there in discussions. Hope people can make it to Atlanta in September too. It'd be great to see people in person. But yeah, I second Whitney. LinkedIn is the best option to connect.
More, thank you, and agreed, and more to come on the conference in Atlanta. We'll have a couple of updates in a few weeks on that, and like Adriana, I am planning to try to be a physical human being with other physical human beings in a place like that. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Thank you so much, Whitney and Adriana, for your insight. This was tremendous. Man, the chat is just blowing up right now. I think this is a really great way to go out. Thank you so much, you guys. This was super informative.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.